Hey everyone, today I'm going to give my thoughts on the newly released Pokemon Scarlet and Violet games. Now at the time of writing this script, I've played for over 30 hours and I'm well and truly into the late game. And while I have beaten the Pokemon League, I haven't actually seen the end credits roll yet. So seeing as I haven't beaten the game, we won't call this a review, we'll say this is my initial impressions, and I'm playing the Scarlet version of the game for the record. So Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are the first games in the 9th generation of Pokemon entries. The games take place in the new Paldea region, and this place has all the things you'd expect from a mainline Pokemon game at this point. There's a bunch of new Pokemon, plus regional variants of existing Pokemon, there's 8 gym badges, there's an evil team for you to fight along the way, and there's a rival who will both assist you and challenge you to battles during your journey. But these games also boast something new for the mainline series: open world gameplay, and we'll talk more about that in a moment, but for now let's look at the start of the game. And we actually have full character customization right away this time. In the previous games, Sword and Shield, you could only choose from a handful of templates and you wouldn't unlock further customization until you progressed into the game. So this seems like a pretty good improvement, right? Giving us more options right from the beginning. Well, this simple starting screen actually represents everything wrong with this game. So hold on to this image, we're going to come back to this later as well. For now though, the story begins as usual with some boomer gifting us a starting Pokemon. This time he's the principal of a Pokemon school rather than a professor, and will be attending the school, which is why we need our own Pokemon. Now I chose the grass starter since I knew other people who were going to choose the water and fire ones. This way I was able to trade and end up with all 3 of them. So the first battle of the game is against our rival, and there's no battle subscreen this time around. The game just transitions into battle right there in the open world. It's a really nice touch and adds some much needed immersion to the Pokemon world. And soon after that, we actually meet the box art Pokemon really early into the game. Now normally you don't get hold of these guys until close to the end of the main story, but not this time. Now the catch is we can't actually use this weird looking monstrosity of a Pokemon to battle. Instead, he's going to be our main form of transportation around the Paldea region. And then we make it to the first real open area of the game. And Game Freak have basically turned the traditional routes into larger open areas that resemble the wild area from Sword and Shield. And while this is a good idea in theory, the execution, well, let's just take a look. Everything in this game has pixelated edges, and I mean everything. Then there's the textures on the land that are just awful. I mean, this game looks like something from the GameCube era. The Pokemon and character models are okay, even though the Pokemon don't close their eyes when they fall asleep anymore like they did in Sword and Shield. And this looks really disturbing. But not compared to the actual environment. That's where the real horror lies. I mean, check this one out. Shadows blink in and out of existence. It's really bizarre. Or my personal favourite, the changing cliff faces. Yeah, the shape of them changes depending on how far away you are. Now, if this was a horror game, these cliffs would fit right in. But in a Pokemon entry, this is terrible. There's also significant pop-in, and it becomes especially noticeable when you unlock the faster modes of transportation. And the main event itself, the frame rate. Look at those windmills in the background. And it's not just windmills, it's anything that's too far away. People, Pokemon, moving objects, they all move like you're watching some bad stop animation. Now when you get close enough, you'll see these objects transition into their full form and they'll start moving properly, at least most of the time they will. Some weather effects will also reduce your frame rate to a crawl. If there's too many Pokemon or other objects that are near you, your frame rate will be brought to a crawl. If you play for too long and your Switch starts getting a bit too hot, you better believe your frame rate will slow to a crawl. The most noticeable example I came across was this gym challenge. Now, gym challenges are similar to last gen. The gym leader will give you some trivial task that you have to complete before you're allowed to battle them. Now, the grass gym has you finding and gathering sunflora as if you're the Pied Piper, and once enough of them started following me, the game absolutely tanked. The frame rate was so bad it was actually making me sick while playing. Like literally, I felt sick. From a technical standpoint, this game is unbelievably bad. Possibly the worst that I've ever played. I mean, this is apparently a AAA game in the year 2022, demanding a AAA price tag. This. Now, I get what they were going for. It seems the developers were trying to make the graphics a bit more realistic rather than the cartoony style of Sword and Shield. But I'm just gonna say it, Sword and Shield, for all their problems, were visually superior to this game. There is no point in making the graphics better if it means that the game can't even run properly. If you do decide to play this game, I definitely recommend playing in the Switch's handheld mode. Not because the game runs any better, it doesn't, but because most of the visual problems will be a lot less noticeable if you're playing on a smaller screen. And that's a pretty sad state of affairs. The harder it is to actually see the game, the better that it's gonna look. Alright, so the visuals are pretty bad. What about the sound? Well, once again, there's no voice acting. Now, this is a staple for Pokemon, and it doesn't really bother me since I normally play these games without sound. I like to sit on the couch with a movie or something playing, and just play the game in handheld mode. And the only reason I didn't do that this time around is because I was streaming the game. But here's the thing, with every generation the games become heavier and heavier on the exposition. There is so much dialogue in this game and the vast majority of it is extremely dull. Now, I don't believe Pokemon games need this much story. In fact, I think they'd be way better if the devs cut the majority of the dialogue and just let us jump in to actually play the game. But if Game Freak and Nintendo are going to insist on having exorbitant amounts of dialogue every single game, they really need to include voice acting. Reading box after box of room temperature dialogue is boring to the point of feeling like a chore. Either ditch the copious amounts of dialogue, or do it properly with voice actors and actual cutscenes. None of this half-done nonsense. And what about the music? Well, again, I normally play these games on mute, so I don't have much to compare it to in terms of past games, but I do like the music in this one. The cowboy tracks that play in some of the western areas of the game are really cool, and the Team Star battle themes are really great, especially the grunt theme. Now, some of the tracks are a bit cringe, like Arven making sandwiches, but overall, the soundtrack is something the developers got right. It's really good. Now, in terms of the game's stability, I personally haven't had any bad glitches or crashes, knock on wood, but apparently quite a few people have. I know one person who lost several hours of progress from a game crash, so if you do play this game, make sure that you are saving often. Now, back to the story. We make it to the school, and it doesn't take long to realise that this is a totally pointless addition to the game. We get a few cutscenes to set up the story, and we can attend classes. Now, these classes are 30-second long cutscenes where you'll get asked a question at the end about your Pokemon knowledge. This might be useful for new players to the franchise, but for those of us who have been around for a while, these classes are not worth the time. Then, after even more exposition, we can finally leave the school to explore the land and actually play the game. Now, you can return to the school and you'll even unlock more classes as you progress through the game, but there's really not much reason to do this. You can get some rewards for filling up your Pokédex and some of the side quests, but the school overall really does feel like a dud. There's not a lot of life to it, there's not too much interesting going on there. And when I was there, I was just waiting until I could leave to actually play the game properly. And in terms of what we can do when we are able to leave the school, there's basically 3 sets of activities that make up the game's story. Now firstly, we can take on the evil team, named Team Star, and they're literally a group of school bullies. The evil teams have become less and less menacing with each passing generation, and I really can't imagine where they're going to go from here. Maybe in the next game there'll be children who will tell you that their dad is tougher than yours, I don't know. But fighting them is a bit of a mixed bag. You battle against the grunts using the new auto battle feature. It's really easy and it's honestly not very satisfying. The boss battles, however, are awesome. They've turned their Pokemon into gigantic cars that you have to battle against. Now it's something different and it's good fun. I like these a lot. The second activity is hunting Titan Pokemon. These are supersized versions of regular Pokemon that we can battle and take down. And doing so will power up our transport boy here, allowing us to move faster or gain new abilities like moving across water. Now these battles are kind of similar to raid battles, and the spectacle of taking these giant beasts down is really cool. And the story around these Titan Pokemon is actually pretty good. It involves the character Arven, who starts off extremely unlikable, but as we learn more about him and his motives, he actually grew on me quite a bit. Not like the Team Star storyline that was just the dumbest thing imaginable. And the final thing we can do is the one that you would expect. There's 8 gym leaders that we can battle through in order to challenge the Elite Four. Now for me, this was the thing I was most excited about, so we're going to head out to do that first. But before we go, it's at this point I figure I can finally change out of my vomit orange pants and wear some clothes that aren't completely cringe-inducing. But you want to know something? I can't. I'm stuck in the school uniform for the whole game. Now you can change variants of the school uniform. There's a whopping 4 in total to choose from. And even better, they all look horrible. So compare this to Sword and Shield, where just about every new city that we reached had a new clothes store that we could go in and purchase new items. And we could mix and match however we wanted. There were hundreds, if not thousands of combinations of tops and pants to wear. Now that's a heck of a lot more than 4. Now we can buy accessories like gloves and socks, but what's the point? The base uniform is hideous and no amount of colourful socks is going to change that. Customization was one of my favourite aspects of Sword and Shield. I put my character in a suit and shades and he looked really awesome. Here, I look like a Steve Urkel wannabe. This is awful. And this is pretty much Pokemon Scarlet and Violet in a nutshell. See, they let us customize our character from the start of the game, which is really good, but then they take away a huge amount of customization overall. And this seems to be the theme of the game. For every step forward that these games take, they insist on taking another 1 or 2 steps backwards. For every cool feature that has been added, another has been taken away. I mean, we can't even use the set battle style anymore. This is a feature we have had for over 25 years. Literally the first ever Pokemon games included this option, changing the battle style to set. For some reason, in these games, it's been removed. And I know that set mode doesn't have a huge effect on gameplay, it just means I have to click on no every time the game asks me if I want to change Pokemon. But it's the principle. I shouldn't have to waste my time doing this. They should have just left the set option in the game. It's such a basic feature and it's not like it's difficult to implement. Why is it gone? So anyway, getting back to my playthrough, since I have the grass starter, I figure the water gym might be a good place to go first. And when the game was announced as open world, I was hoping this would mean the world would scale with your level. So if you fought the water gym as the first badge, he might be around level 15 to 20. But if you left him until the final gym, his Pokemon would be super strong around the level 60 mark. But sadly, this isn't the case. The game's levels are set and they will not change. So while you could fight the water gym first, he's around level 30, 35, so you're going to have to grind for levels to face him. And doing this will of course leave you really over-leveled for all the gyms that you skipped in order to fight this guy first. Now this is pretty common in open world games. Some areas are higher leveled than others, so I won't complain too much about it, but I was a bit disappointed. I think there was a lot of potential here that Game Freak could have capitalized on, but they didn't. And see, the biggest annoyance with the leveling in this game, I know I just said I'm not going to complain, and here I am complaining, but it's the design of the world that is just so counterintuitive. When you first leave the main city, the game makes a big deal about whether you should go east or west. Now, it's your choice, but the reality is that if you do the gym leaders in the intended order as per the level of their Pokemon, and this goes for all activities in the game, but we'll specifically talk about gym leaders here. Now, you're going to have to go west for the first battle, then head to the east section for the second and third battles, then crisscross over back to the west to face the fourth gym, and on it goes. There's no logical path to follow in this game. You're just expected to jump back and forth between different areas with no real rhyme or reason. I mean, let's look at a game like Elden Ring, another open world game that came out this year. Now, it pretty much follows the structure that the further north you go in the map, the tougher the enemies are gonna become. Now, there are some exceptions to that rule, I know, but overall, it's a very well-constructed and logical path for the player to follow. In Scarlet and Violet, the levels of areas are just scattered about randomly, and there's no sensible path for you to follow across the landscape. You'll just suddenly find yourself in an area where you're really underleveled, and you're going to have to travel to the opposite side of the region, hoping that you can find a spot where there's less powerful opponents. But while we're on the topic of gyms, let's take a moment to look at character designs in this game. Now, this is Nessa, the water gym leader in Pokemon Sword and Shield. Now, she's my favourite gym leader of all time, because I'm a man and she... Alright, but more seriously, Nessa has a great character design. She's slim, athletic, and elegant. Everything that you would expect from a water trainer who likely spends a lot of her time swimming. It's a completely sensible and fitting character design. You want to see the water gym leader in this game? Yeah, it's an old fat guy with 2 monobrows. I mean, this man is defying the very definition of a monobrow. There's only supposed to be one. But he's just like, nah, I'ma slap the Batman logo on my forehead to look as hideous as I possibly can. And it's not just him. So many of the character models in this game are just so bizarre looking. And I have to stress, Sword and Shield are generally considered some of the weaker games in the series, but the character designs there are leagues better than the horror show that we got in this game. I mean, why does the streamer gym leader have jagged teeth and a straitjacket? Now, this could be Game Freak giving some meta commentary about the rise of ethos and the collapse of Western civilization, but somehow I doubt it. I think it's much more likely that the developers simply thought that this was a cool design for a gym leader. And if that's what they thought, perhaps Game Freak should take a break from Pokemon to develop the next Saints Row game instead. So the characters suck, but what about the designs of the new Pokemon? Now, just like most generations for the last 15 years, the new Pokemon are a mixed bag. Like this regional form of Tauros that is all black is super cool. As soon as I saw this thing, I knew I wanted one on my team. But for every Tauros, we also have a Pokemon like Flamigo here. Yeah, it's literally just a flamingo where they dropped the N from the word and called it a day. So some of the new monsters are great, while others are pretty bad. And our grass starter here is a good example. His first form is a cute little kitten, that's alright. In his second form, he turns into a little Naruto-style ninja, which is really cool. And his third form, well, he becomes a literal clown. Now, when I chose this guy, I was hoping he'd evolve into a massive green jungle tiger. That would have been really awesome. But no, instead I get a court jester. But hey, at least I didn't choose the water starter. It evolves into this thing. Now, for the record, the final form of the fire starter is pretty awesome. It's by far the best of the 3, and I really regret not choosing that. And now's probably a good time to talk about the new gimmick of this game, terrestrialization. probably butchering the pronunciation of that. But the way it works is that a Pokemon can terastallize, it'll gain a coat of crystal armor, and some Pokemon can even change their type when they undergo this process. Now, it's not nearly as cool as Dynamaxing. In fact, the Pokemon look pretty stupid when they do this, but the type changing can help keep battles interesting. It's not a bad mechanic. And instead of raid den battles like we had last gen, this time we have Terra raid battles. You play these with 3 other trainers, either other players or NPCs, but the difference here, as opposed to last gen, is that all trainers seem to be able to take their turns concurrently. So this means you don't have to wait for other players before you can take another turn. So while that is nice, it also means you don't have to cooperate with the other trainers nearly as much. Everyone can just kind of do their own thing. In fact, in most of these battles, I didn't even know what the other trainers were doing. So these Terra raids, they're okay, but they're nothing compared to the endless dungeons in the Crown Tundra DLC. Now, to be fair, I am still playing through the late game story, so the post game may expand on these Terra raid battles, so that is something to consider. Now, there's also a co-op feature where you can play the game together with friends. I haven't spent a great deal of time with it, so I'm not sure how restricted or non-restricted it is in terms of what you can do while you're co-oping, but it does seem like a pretty cool feature. My friends and I would have loved to be able to do this back in the day during school lunchtimes. Alright, what haven't I covered yet? How about the controls? That's an important aspect of game, right? Well, surprise, surprise, the controls in this game suck. As in, I detest the controls even more than the frame rate drops. I think the controls are probably the single worst part of the game. See, in these games, we've introduced some real-time mechanics, just like they did in Pokemon Legends. You can sneak up on Pokemon, giving you a free turn where the Pokemon can't react if you can engage the battle while they're unaware of your presence. Now that's all fine, but to go with that, the game has a lock-on mechanic. You hold down the left trigger and you can, theoretically, lock onto a Pokemon, chuck a Pokeball while sneaking, and that's going to surprise the monster, giving you the advantage in the battle. But the problem is the lock-on doesn't work. I mean, it really just doesn't work. This game makes the lock-on feature in Elden Ring seem like a flawless masterpiece. I mean, you can see me here. Every time the camera zooms in a little, that's me hitting the lock-on button. And sometimes it just doesn't work. I mean, it works when it feels like it. There doesn't seem to be much consistency. And usually I have to get so close to the Pokemon for the lock-on to work that it's easier just to run up to it and start the battle normally. And I would propose that if a game is infinitely more enjoyable to play when you completely ignore an added feature, perhaps that feature wasn't worth adding. Maybe Game Freak could have spent that time giving us the set mode back instead. Just a thought. Now, with how negative I'm being in this video, you probably think I hate this game, right? But I don't. I'm actually having lots of fun with it. And this is the thing about Pokemon games and why the franchise has been so successful for so long. The core mechanics are just that good. You can choose to play the game very simply and just pick your favourite mons, or you can go headfirst down the rabbit hole of competitive Pokemon, and you can find hours worth of hidden mechanics that will influence how your team performs. All of that is still here, and it's just as fun as ever. And Pokemon is a really good franchise at giving players the choice of how casual or hardcore they want to play. But maybe battling isn't your main focus anyway. Maybe you just want to collect as many Pokemon as you can. And this is something Scarlet and Violet absolutely nail. There are so many Pokemon to catch and add to your team even before you get to the first gym. And this is why my playthrough took so long. Every time I rock up to a new area, I cannot wait to see what Pokemon are out there and add them to my collection. And the choice is massive. Even really cool Pokemon like Ghastly, Eevee, Larvitar, and Scyther are all available really early into the game. No more having to wait until you're 4 badges deep to come across the exciting Pokemon in the wild. Here, a lot of them are available very early on. We are spoiled for choice. And here with my Eevee, as soon as I caught it, I could immediately run to the snowy part of the map. I just ignored all of the trainers and the wild Pokemon which were too high level for me, and I found myself an Ice Stone. I could then get a Glaceon before even having my second badge, and I could have done it before the first badge if I wanted to. Having the freedom to build your team we want early in the game is one of the most important aspects of Pokemon for me as a player. I was so bored in Shining Pearl when seemingly every single wild Pokemon I encountered was a Geodude, a Ponyta, or a Kricketot. Now, nothing against any of those Pokemon, but having variety is what Pokemon is all about. And Scarlet and Violet are amongst the best games in the franchise when it comes to having a wide variety of monsters for us to catch early into the game. And here is where I think it's time to consider the bigger picture of this franchise. Now, these games are going to sell well, we all know that. And despite what some people may say, it's not because we're all just a bunch of hyper consumers, even though I personally probably am when it comes to Pokemon. But see, the reason these games are going to sell well is because the core mechanics of Pokemon are fantastic. I mean, there's a plethora of YouTube channels out there dedicated almost exclusively to playing old Pokemon games. I know because I watch a lot of them. And for people like us, it's obvious that high production value is not what keeps drawing us back to this franchise. It's the designs of the monsters and the gameplay. But at the same time, we need to face the obvious issue. When it comes to relatively high fidelity consoles like the Switch, Game Freak seem to be out of their element. I mean, they've been making turn-based handheld games for over 20 years. That's been pretty much the only thing they've done. So it's understandable that things like optimization, high-resolution graphics, and real-time controls simply aren't their strong points. They haven't had to worry about these things as much in the past. Who cares if the controls on your turn-based game are a little bit clunky? It's not going to impact the player all that much, and no one is expecting excellent graphics and huge open environments with high frame rates on a handheld console. But here's the thing, the Switch is not a handheld console, apart from the Lite version of course, but the main Switch console is a hybrid console. And it seems pretty clear that Game Freak needs some assistance with making a good-looking game that runs well on a hybrid console. And the thing is, Nintendo has been making some awesome high-fidelity games, Mario and Zelda being the obvious franchises. And I think if Pokemon is to ever become the amazing franchise that we know it can be, and I don't mean financially, I mean in terms of quality, then perhaps Nintendo should be giving Game Freak a bit more support. Why can't those same people working on Mario and Zelda lend some of their expertise to the Pokemon games? And understand here, I'm not trying to throw mud at Game Freak. There's plenty of things that Game Freak are excellent at. They are my second favourite game developer after Firaxis. I'm a fan of the work these people do, but knowing your limitations is a vital part of achieving success in any walk of life, especially business. And Game Freak clearly has a deficit here. See, Pokemon is on the right track. There's a lot of good things introduced in this game. The open world design is a big improvement for the franchise. But just imagine what these games could be with a bit more time and care. A Pokemon game that not only has the core battling and capturing mechanics that we all love, but also that runs well and blows people away with how gorgeous it looks. If you ask me, that'd be a good recipe for the greatest game of all time. Now, are we ever going to get this game? That's the million-dollar question. And the answer is, we're probably not, at least not the way things are going right now. Nintendo will very likely just have Game Freak keep pumping out titles way too quickly with not enough time, not enough support, just so that the cash supply can keep rolling in. However, if I were to try and appeal to Nintendo's desire for profit, that is why they exist after all, here's the case I would make. You let me know if it's a good one or not. See, what if the day comes that when the core gameplay mechanics just aren't enough anymore? What if the day comes when the OG players like me, who are willing to put aside graphics and performance because we grew up on the original games, what if the day comes that we lose interest? What happens when the majority of your audience is not willing to look past the technical problems and horrid visuals? Now maybe that day will never come, but if it does, you're going to have to start paying more attention to those other aspects of the game, and by that stage, it may be too late. Waiting until your audience is already abandoning you before you start to fix the problems is a risky strategy in the long term. Just look at what that very approach has done to Disney's stock price this year. Now, I think, personally, it's a much wiser long-term strategy to try to keep your fans satisfied. This is going to be much easier to do than trying to win them back after their interest has waned and they've already left the building. So perhaps, Nintendo, just perhaps you should start addressing the deficits in these new Pokemon games now and giving Game Freak the support that they need while you still have the time to do so and while this franchise is still on top. You don't want to wait until the decline has already started before you address it. Perhaps being proactive is a better strategy than being reactive. But hey, what do I know? I'm just some guy on the internet. So in conclusion, should you buy this game? I don't know, it's your money, not mine. If you can look past the glaring technical issues, stupidly long exposition sections, lack of customization options, and rancid character designs, and not having set mode, I can't forget that one. But if you can look past all that, there's a really fun Pokemon game to be found under the layers of muck. Now, if any of those things are deal breakers for you, you're probably better off avoiding this one. So let me know your thoughts on Pokemon Scarlet and Violet in the comments section. Do you agree or disagree with me? Did I miss out on anything important? I'm sure I did. And also, I've been streaming Scarlet in full on Twitch. You can check out the VODs of these streams on my archive channel if you're interested. The link to that is in the description. And that's all from me. A bit of a different video for me today. I do like experimenting with new content, so I hope you enjoyed this one. And next time I will be back with another XCOM 2 challenge run. I know it's been a little while since we did one of those, but I hope you'll join me for that. And until then, have a great day.